Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another 21st Century Renaissance and another open interest news at a breakdown on GameStop. I'm your host, Dr. Michael LoPiano, and today we're going to be looking at some interesting Chicago volume that came through yesterday, some particularly large volume out of the October calls, thinking about what that might mean for our price outlook, for our price action situation going forward, as well as thinking and continuing to reflect on some of our contextual factors going into the end of this week, the first week in this September OPEX period. So that's coming up today. Before we get started, we are going to turn our attention first to our Bible reading, certainly in the history, in the tradition of our good friend Richard Newton. And so we're picking up, of course, in Genesis. We're going to be working through the book of Genesis to begin this this new tradition over at 21st Century Renaissance, especially thinking about, I want to talk about this because it's something that's been proven so important in the way that I've come to organize my life and sort of reorient my vision. And I would consider understanding this book, among certainly many others, key to how I was able to develop my vision and figure out, how to actually do everything that I'm doing with trading, as far as all the other things within the context, I should say, of the rest of my life. So yesterday, of course, we started out looking at the first couple verses of Genesis chapter 1, that is the book of becoming, as it's known in Greek, Genesis. And so we saw yesterday, of course, we get this introduction to there being this idea, right? This metaphysical idea that there is this something called God, this entity, this being, maybe even this source of all being, right? The source of the laws of creation, the source of the rules that govern what it is to be within this dimension of reality, something like that. And we see the way that this comes to be, and we see that there are things that exist prior to space and time, right? This is an important component of the book of Genesis, is a declaration that there is something else beyond the confines of space and time. And we see this framed narratively through this creating God, this entity that lies outside of space and time, bringing space and time into being. So today we're going to pick up with what happens immediately after he goes ahead and brings space and time into being. We're starting with verse 6. And then God said, "Let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. Thus God made the firmament and divided the waters which were under the firmament, and from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. And God called the firmament heaven. So the evening and the morning were the second day." So we get this idea, right? We have this sort of structure that's mapped out. We have this word firmament, interestingly, right? But this is something like a solid standing place, right? A place, this is in the creation of the earth, a place on which things are grounded, something like that. And there's these two waters that are separated by the firmament. And I've thought about this for a while, but of course, it's so important to consider when thinking about these stories, right? These are intensely metaphorical. There's a lot of meaning that's packed into these, this very tight and imagistic language. And it's important, to consider something beyond just kind of the material dimensions of these words, right? We think water, we think a heart, like a kind of ground thing. Like this is very strange to think about this in this way. Wait, there are waters above, there are waters below. We could think about that in terms of, say, just like rain and water, but there isn't an earth yet, right? There isn't that. How does that square? Materially, it's a bit strange. But if we consider the sort of homology between these terms and the idea that, there is a firm standing place, right? We have space and time established, but we have a potential above and a potential below, right? We're calling our discussion of this stand-in, right? This idea of waters existing before there are even space and time. This can't be talking about molecular water. That doesn't make any sense, right? So there's this idea, right? Water is a symbol of potential, something of chaotic potential, along with the deep, right? And but God sort of inserts in this narrative, right? God inserts a firm standing place in the midst of the waters. and places some water above, that is overhead, and some water below. And so what I gather here is there's a way of mapping out this idea that there is potential, right? And potential is split by this eternal moment of actuality, right? It's the sort of things happen. There is a place for things to happen. There is a place where potential can lie ahead and indicate how the present, how that firmament will transform, and potential that is behind, right? Potential perhaps that was, potential behind or prior in time that shaped the way that the firmament is now. So we have this outlining of the relationship, of course, between actuality and possibility, both future possibility and how it will shape what is, and former possibility and how it shaped in the past what is, even though as a possibility it may be past us. So important to reflect on that and think about how that can help illustrate the way that you think about the dimensions of this game. Let's say this game of life and existence and being that you're playing now. That's certainly part of how I envision my understanding of things. And yeah, it's certainly very motivating for me when thinking about how to structure my action and decisions. So yeah, so there's our Genesis reading for today. Let's hop over to the stock par excellence, and that is GameStop. Before we get into our discussion, of course, we also need to start out with our gratitude. Today's gratitude is going out to Scott for sponsoring today's article and video breakdown. Thank you very much, Scott, for sponsoring them. Yeah, wonderful. Very nice to meet you, Scott. Hopefully out there we know each other by some other names. I'd also like to go ahead and thank our monthly supporters, Not Medical Advice, Master Kurt Lusko, Cosmotropic, excuse me, to Swag52, and Hey Luckies, aka Faithless Looter, for helping sponsor the project here on a recurring basis. Thank you so much, right? Thank you much to everyone who has contributed so far. I love how active you guys have been in the comments. It's so great to be received so well, especially coming back after this summer hiatus. So glad that all of you are a part of this community and a part of this 21st Century Renaissance project. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the stonk. What I would say overall, I would not say that my outlook has changed too much into what to expect this week. If you've got kind of a 2-cent thing to kind of take away, I'm still basically looking at kind of sideways into the 22.50, 23 area. Maybe we get another chance kind of midweek to pop back up into that 23, 24 range, but not a lot, right? Very low volume options day, not a lot of reconfiguring with respect to that structure and to our options landscape. That's not really signaling anything different than prior expectations, but we can walk through some significant events that occurred throughout the day, and maybe if there's some insight that can lend us for the time being. So first off, definitely want to give a shout out over to Reese Politics and over to the Ultimator 5, certainly yesterday, for keeping an eye on what's going on over on Red Stripe Tie. Great site, Red Stripe Tie. It's free, by the way, for anyone that wants to use their data, but it's very good at tracking outsized orders and particularly taking a look at things that may not necessarily show up over in some of our other scanners. So we can find and see here particularly large orders, and we have seen, of course, in the past that some funky stuff typically happens with GameStop when we see Chicago trade volume come in. So when we see New York Stock Exchange, Chicago, very large orders. We did see 400 went at the bid, and over 1 million shares went at the ask, in 2 separate ones that look to have been qualifying contingent trades. So Chicago trades typically tend to be qualifying contingent trades, which means they come in paired with another type of order, usually with respect to some sort of derivative. So the most common way to see that is going to be paired with options. So we can go over, for example, take a look at our options data, and we can see usually when these come in, there is an accompanying options trade that usually says, okay, these hedges, these shares came in as delta hedges, and we can usually get a good ballpark for that if we look at the delta and size on the contracts over on the option side of things, and then try to match that up with the number of shares. Now, what's very interesting, and Ultimator certainly pointed this out as well, These were not qualifying contingent trades that had to do with options. There is and was no accompanying options trade with respect to these share trades. Neither were there any, did we see these exited, right? So what this likely tells us, because these are QCTs, that these were likely paired with a swap. So Ultimator, of course, identified this during the day, especially with respect to the smaller of the two. No, sorry, the larger of the, excuse me. Yes, the larger of the two of these, especially the 1 million share order here. And sure enough, right, we did end up seeing, we'll take a look at this in a second. We did end up seeing some decent options volume out at October, some pretty large orders, but not in a way that really made obvious sense as far as delta hedging was concerned. So really what this looks to have done, if we take a look at our landscape, may have had something to do, the second of these, with whatever caused this very strange IV pop-up kind of late in the day, right? That's a 3 percentage point hike up there. That's pretty big. And then immediately back down. So a little funky stuff right there. And of course, it came in before the volume on close. So a little strange. Not sure why exactly that happened. We did actually, despite moving down, have implied volatility basically trickle up the whole day, about 2 percentage points between open and close. So interesting to see that, but likely this move, right? So right at the bottom here, I think is around when we saw that first QCT, that big Chicago trade come in. And then it seems like this shorting episode may have been right here, right? A little unusual volume uptick, see at the bottom here, and a very strange candle, followed by a pretty sharp reversal back to and then back above VWAP. So right to about 23, which of course was a pretty large position in terms of call gamma exposure to the options market maker. So it's going to have a resistant property. So we sort of rode that right back up to VWAP, right back up to the 23 before settling back down again. The second of these orders, the 400,000 one, may have caused this kind of reversal back towards the upside and stimulated this IV disturbance here toward the close. But all in all, rather modest in terms of effects. We'll see if we get some more volume in this regard. If we see some more orders piling up, it's probably worth looking into a little bit more deeply. While we take a look at some of our broader contextual factors, of course, we do see that, very mildly FedWatch adjusted probabilities on the 25-point cut expectations for September. Still largely saying that it's highly likely, it's mostly likely, but there is a non-negligible chance that rates will stay steady. Of course, we did see more I guess Truth Social tirades regarding Jerome Powell. The too late Powell thing kind of got hammered a little bit yesterday. So don't know if that influenced any of this probability calculation. Bitcoin also, right? We talked about this yesterday. Bitcoin thought it might find support at the 50-day moving average. It did not. It fell straight through there yesterday during the day and is trading just above the 100-day moving average. I'll just take a look and make sure that's still the case. It has rallied a little bit since then, basically before equities market open. But might find some support there. I think it's probably likely that it does, but always possibility that it doesn't. While it slips a little bit, that is going to have a slightly depressive effect on GameStop's fundamental valuation. I mean, we're talking maybe 10 cents. It's not a lot, but it does put a little bit more downwards pressure. It's also probably been baked in. That may have had an effect. Most of that effect may have been basically assessed yesterday with respect to GameStop's price action. Maybe it starts to move back up. We get a little bit of price recovery off the bottom, but that is going to have a non-zero effect on how GameStop's going to be priced by algorithms, I guess, on average throughout the day, something like that. OI stuff, yeah, options volume way down. I even noticed this on my end of things, trading and getting fills throughout the day. Right. So generally when overall options volume is down, it's a lot harder to get fills. You can't fire off orders quite as quickly and get them filled. So definitely noticed that. Probably ended up doing like less than half of Monday's trading volume yesterday. So just based on the fact that volume was so much lower, spreads were tighter in some places, really just couldn't get kind of trades through, without, just couldn't get them through. So we definitely see that too. Interesting to see that kind of validated by taking a look at our our OI changes, which definitely reflect that. But yeah, then this was kind of the only trade out in the future that looked pretty interesting. Is this wasn't one trade. This was several different block trades culminating in a close to $1 million in premium, not quite $1 million in premium. It was probably closer to like 700K. I may have overstated that in the article write-up for today. But really interesting to see that kind of come in. It came before the second of the QCTs, but after maybe the Chicago volume was settled. So it should have been settled like somewhere, well, settled in the sense of shown up on the market, which it did, basically in here. So as it was going up, it looked like this position was opened maybe as that trade was coming through, and it was pushing our price in the underlying up. So just, I mean, that's some interesting volume. It's not crazy big, but close to 5,000 contracts for a long out of the money strike is definitely noteworthy. Good pointing that out. What I would think at this point is that is likely meant to capture some volume and price improvement and volatility basically in the coming weeks. Again, maybe not this week, probably not this week, probably not next week, although the chance that something does start to move toward the end of next week is higher. I'm still not going to go ahead and say, oh yeah, definitely 27th, 28th, we're firing off. There's a chance, it's a higher chance than now, but it's not quite what I would say like, oh yeah, thinking about September 1st, September 5th, that's kind of more the sweet spot where we'd expect some major price improvement. But also keep in mind, they might just hold this stuff right until earnings and then kind of let the price improvement come as a reaction to Q2 earnings report. So yeah, gamma exposure, not changing too much. Max pain staying at 2250. Right, so we'll continue. The later we push into the week, we'll get a slight downward pressure from first, of course, we can see the 24 call gamma is starting to fade as charm is taking its effect there. This will continue into the end of the week until basically we've only got 23 as our like super big outstanding call wall position, which is already kind of emerging as the case. And yeah, likely close somewhere between 2250 and 23 again, just below that call wall, send all that stuff out of the money, I think is very likely for this week. So not too much new stuff to report in that regard, obviously. With that said, certainly for me, right, as I'm going and thinking about my trades, what I'm going to do, how I plan on approaching any given trading day, like confirmation of my thesis from earlier in the week about how the week will go out is equally as useful, certainly to me, in terms of what I'm doing, certainly with respect to a number of different aspects of my trading strategies, both in sort of the medium and the immediate term. So yeah, happy to report that, certainly. Little sideways action never hurt anybody. That's there's a lot of golden opportunities when we get that kind of continuation. May not seem that way, certainly requires a lot more patience if you're kind of only in the buy and hold category, but yeah, but if you trade, certainly if you take part in one or more options games, anything like that, then that sideways trading can be quite and not even just options, right? Even like day trading shares and stuff like that. It's still, a lot of opportunities to be found. So hope you guys have a great day. Thanks so much, as always, for tuning in. Thank you for watching and listening. Very excited to see, of course, what's coming up around the bend. And I look forward to seeing you guys tomorrow. Have a great day. Take care.